HQ in Nashville, Tennessee, to wherever you're cheering on your Tennessee Titans. The So Bros Network presents the Unofficial Titans Podcast.
Welcome back for another episode of the Unofficial Titans Podcast right here on So Bros Network, powered by Memo's Mexican Kitchen, the best Mexican food in the Nashville area right here in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, just a mile north of I-40 off the Mount Juliet exit. It's your boy, Big Natural Stoney Keeley, flying solo for today's episode. You guys know how it gets. Things run a little hot. It gets late in the week and we don't have an episode. I don't know if Owen's free right now. I don't know if I'll be free by the time he is free. So we just got to do the episode. We just got to talk into this microphone whenever we get the chance to do so. We do have our minds right and our asses tight, and we are going to be kicking off the campaign march towards the 2024 season. We were supposed to have like a training camp preview episode before training camp actually gets started next week, but with everything that's happened this week, I'm gonna weigh in on a couple of things. We had a nice little break there for a few weeks. It's been a minute since you've heard from me on the Unofficial Titans Podcast because we had our offseason content going on. I've been on Football and Other F Words. I've been on Stacking the Inbox, doing some film studies, doing some writing, written a couple of pieces for So Bros Network, but just tried to kind of lay low for a little bit and try to rest and rejuvenate for the 2024 season. Didn't happen at all, but nevertheless, we carry on. I want to talk about the Jamal Adams signing a little bit today. I said it in my Film Friday piece for Stacking the Inbox, but I know my Twitter account, I try to make it for everyone out there, right? Like I don't want to just tweet about Titans football all the time because I have people that follow me for other reasons and all that stuff. And I tweet a lot of nonsense, and if for people that don't want to put up with that shit and don't follow me on Twitter, it's fine, no hard feelings, but I got to kind of cross over a little bit, and that's what I'm doing here too, because you've heard a lot about Jamal Adams over the week or so. I haven't tweeted a whole lot. If you don't follow me, if you don't feel like putting up with the bullshit, just listen to the podcast, and I'll double down. I'll make sure that you get that coverage here as well. And I want to talk about Jeffrey Simmons' comments about bookmarking shit, people getting blocked. I think it's kind of an interesting discussion. And I do have a few training camp battles that I want to get through today. Probably a quick episode, just kind of resetting. We'll really get into the weeds on training camp and the 2024 iteration of this Titans team next week. Hoping to get Owen sitting down and catching up with him. We haven't done an episode together in over a month at this point, since the last time we actually recorded one of the off-season content episodes. So the break is over, and we are back to talking Titans on a weekly basis, and we are going to focus on the 2024 campaign. Training camp around the corner. The preseason will be here before you know it, and we'll have some real football to break down. I love this time of year. Myself, I know a lot of people are starting to get tired of summer, and that's what I think makes July and February the two worst months of the year. Because in July you start getting to that point where you're like, man, this is just the sports calendar is dead. There's no games to watch. I mean, I'm watching tape from the 23 season, kind of getting ready for the next year's draft, so on and so forth, but there's no sports on. The NBA season's over. The NHL season's over. The Euros have concluded, and there's nothing to watch. Same way in February. Like the season's over. I'm tired of the cold weather. I'm ready for it to warm off. Just like in July, I'm ready for it to cool off. It's a tough stretch to get through, but luckily, we only have a couple more weeks left. Hall of Fame game is going to be here before you know it. And then we got preseason action to break down. I'm stoked for training camp to start. Let's start with the Jamal Adams signing, because I was being a bit of an ass on Twitter when it happened. You know my style. I'm pretty sarcastic. I can be a bit of a troll. I can be a bit passive aggressive. I made a comment about let Rand cook with an asterisk that said let Rand and his boys cook, That's just accountability on my part, because if we're going to be critical about Mike Vrabel hiring all his friends, we have to keep that same energy for Rand Carthon when he signs players through connections. He talked about using his relationships. I just want to keep the same energy out there, okay? We said it was a problem for Mike Vrabel. Let's acknowledge that Rand Carthon has made a few hires, made a few signings through his network. That's all I'm saying. I said if y'all don't like the Jamal Adams signing, or no, I said y'all better like the Jamal Adams signing or he's going to call your wives fugly, which is referring to him calling out a writer's, well, not calling out a writer's wife. A writer posts a film clip, not too kind to Jamal Adams, and Jamal Adams retweets it with a photo of the guy's wife and just says, yikes. And then doubles down when he's asked about it. Says something along the lines of, when people go low, I go lower. You see the headlines. Like former teams are excited to get this guy out of the building. The fans don't want him anymore. The fans don't like him. Quote unquote, he's an asshole. And I'm thinking, like, why the fuck would you try to solve your safety problem with a guy like that? It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Then I do the tape study. And I can't fathom a scenario that Rand Carthon and Denard Wilson are watching the Jamal Adams tape and saying, yes, you know what? This guy can be our Swiss Army knife safety. We're going to drop him. He's still got the range to cover. He can do it all. Because that's not what he is. And then the money comes out. It's like $1.125 million. You're like, okay, well, they're not paying him to be the do-it-all safety. And you watch the tape and you realize the Seattle Seahawks used him in a way that was very careful, meticulous. They tried their best to scheme him up in ways where he wouldn't be one-on-one at a disadvantageous position. And I think it worked for the most part. I mean, I watched 5 games, and Film Friday is up on Stacking the Inbox now as I record this. I watched 5 games against the Browns, against the Bengals, against the Ravens, the 49ers, and the Dallas Cowboys. I think that's a good sample size. I mean, shit, I think he only played in 9 games last year. I watched the bulk of his season. And there weren't too many times in games that I felt like he ended up on an island in a coverage situation that he couldn't manage. For the most part, he's a pretty sound, sturdy player. So I cooled off on the signing. I'm still interested to see, like, who's going to be the first media member to draw his ire, to cross paths with the guy and bow up on him a little bit. How's that going to go? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, you know what? Like, if people come after me, I am the same level of petty. Like, if you go low, I'm going to go lower. So can I really hate on the guy all that much? I don't know. The injury history does concern me. You get to a point in your career, and he's only 28 years old, but to get into his 7th season, and now it's not just like one thing that's slowing him down, but you're starting to get that injury bug where multiple different issues that are unrelated seemingly start popping up. And that worries me a little bit, but seeing the contract, dollars, seeing the tape made me cool off and say, okay, you know what? I don't know that the Titans are done at the safety position. And as a sidebar, if they could go ahead and sign Quandre Diggs, I think that would be pretty good. I mean, he still plays some good ball. You're watching Jamal Adams, and several times I'm like, damn, number 6 is popping. Diggs is out there playing ball. So I cooled off on the signing a little bit. And then when the further I got into the tape, specifically I thought the Browns game and the Bengals game were both pretty good games for Adams. And I start to see a role for Adams in this defense. And I think it's defending the flat. I think it's clogging up throwing lanes in the red zone. I think it's blitzing. And not just the fire zone blitzes, where, you line up a safety at the end of the line of scrimmage and then you overload the other side so that you're thinking it's coming from one direction, but then they may blitz the safety and drop everybody else, or they may drop the safety and blitz somebody from the other side. No, they lined him up as a big nickel at times and sent him from there with the linebacker or the edge dropping out into that zone. And they got kind of creative with how they sent him. And I think for a defense that probably will be predicated on a lot of pressure, winning the defensive front, I think they'll use him as a piece there. I don't know that he is. It's weird because you watch the tape, and I'll give credit to my buddy Jake Robertson of the Morning Glory show every Thursday morning at Glory Day Sports on YouTube. He brought it up like it looked like he was trying to avoid contact. And there were times in run support that I thought he took some bad angles, and it did kind of look like he was a little hesitant to really dive in there. There's other games where he's feisty, he's fighting. And so I landed on a spot where I give him a bit of a pass for some of that. I think there's some inconsistency in his open field tackling, and part of me just wondered if he's just trying to protect himself. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I mean, do you fault a player for trying to protect themselves on the field? I don't know. I mean, there are times where I can at least understand it. Probably not the best thing, but you get it. And there were times on his tape where I thought he had a chance to make a tackle, and he didn't. And that's where you have to decide for yourself, like, as an evaluator, if you're Rand Carthon, if you're Denard Wilson, are you okay with it if you root it out and you say, well, are you protecting yourself or is something else going on? Your aim's off. And if you're comfortable with a player protecting themselves, you're fine with the signing. But I did think that was an issue. I don't think he supports the run in the way that most people think when you hear support the run, right? You're thinking like, meet me in the hole and duke it out, right? Crash the gap and blow up the running back kind of deal. Where I think Adams excels in run support is being the cleanup artist, where maybe if a defensive lineman, an edge, a linebacker can get a hand on the shoestring kind of deal, slow him down just the slightest bit, Adams can still close on a ball carrier. I do think he's a plus in run support. And you hear people say like, okay, well, why was this a priority? Why was a player like this a priority? And I would say two things. One, this Titans defense is pretty fucking young. I mean, they've invested heavily in it in the draft, and there has been a bit of an overhaul in the leadership. I think you have like Jeffrey Simmons, clearly a vocal leader, and then you go get two corners in Cheeto and Sneed, and you have Amani Hooker. But like outside of that, man, they're kind of doing a little bit of rebuilding, retooling, reshuffling, not only from a personnel standpoint, but from a vibe standpoint. And so adding a Jamal Adams type, one, you get the experience, you get the leadership qualities. And I do think there are still leadership qualities that show up on the tape in how effective he is at communicating motion. When something happens on offense, Jamal Adams is signaling, he's adjusting, he's getting into the right spot. He recognizes a lot of stuff, and situations where he did end up one-on-one with a tight end. I think about the Dallas game against Jake Ferguson specifically. Jake Ferguson trying to throw little like flares at him, like sell out but break in. Jamal Adams didn't bite on it. Recognizing the looks, understanding like the numbers game in real time. When a guy comes through his zone, understanding that the other guys are guarded, and now this is my guy, this is my responsibility, and carrying him through the zone, either onto the next zone for the next guy to cover or to go down the field with him. I think you see those things. But I also think you still need depth. You still need depth because where they're at in the safety room, you don't have a lot of NFL experience beyond Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden. So if you need somebody to come out and fill this role, and specifically where I think he lands is like a big nickel that can match up against tight ends, maybe not the more dynamic ones like your Travis Kelce's, your George Kittles, but your Jake Ferguson's, yeah, he can lock him down as a big nickel. Dime linebacker that has the range to patrol the middle of the field for the crossing stuff, can still clamp down on the short to mid-range stuff, but also feisty and physical enough to get in there and make a tackle when he needs to. So you start doing the numbers game. You say, well, why was this such a priority? It's the question I've spent like 5 minutes blabbering about instead of answering. And well, if you need to put two nickels out there, you got Roger McCreary on one side. Who do you have on the other? I mean, are you going to thrust Jarvis Brownlee Jr. into that role right now? You can put James Williams out there. I mean, the offseason has not been met with glowing reviews of James Williams so far. I like James Williams. I'm kind of interested to see how the project plays out, but I think he's a special teams player in year one. Do you put Elijah Molden out there? And if you do put Elijah Molden out there as the big nickel, well, then who are you playing at safety? Because we're putting the puzzle pieces down and we're realizing we're only a formation, a personnel grouping away from the Titans having to field a player that doesn't have a lot of NFL experience. And I'm not going to name them by names, okay? Why? Because there was a burial of Matthew Jackson. Poor Matthew Jackson didn't just catch a stray. He caught about 10 strays on Football and Other F Words. I'm trying to give the kid a break. I want to bring him up. He's a fine player for his level. Developmental guy. See what he turns into. But I don't think it's ideal for guys like him to be on the field in meaningful games. And then you look at the linebacker spot and you say, okay, well, you have guys that can be the heat-seeking missile in Kenneth Murray. Jack Gibbons, really gap-sound run defender. But who of those guys has the real range to get out there and run with a tight end that is crossing the formation if they need to? Or, a bigger slot receiver. Your guys like Tyler Boyd, for example, that might not have the quickness they used to have, but they're still shifty, and they need a guy that can get up in their fucking grill and disrupt the pass. I don't know that the Titans have them. So again, you're like a personnel grouping away from having to put Jack Gibbons in a situation where like he's got to get out there and try to run with Sam Laporta or something like that, And that's where I think you see the value of the depth, because ultimately I do think this was a depth signing. And I'm on board with it now. I made my jokes. I got my little bullshit troll jobs out of the way day one, and then I dug into the tape, and I said, you know what? I think this is actually going to be really fucking awesome for the Titans. And I've got a full piece, a 9-minute video on stackingtheinbox.com, Jamal Adams tape supporting my claim and highlighting exactly why I like him, highlighting the limitations that he still has, and showing some pretty fun plays too. I think he can be a fun player. You hope like he's not the asshole that some of the media has painted him out to be. You hope that he's not going to be taking shots at people's wives on Twitter. And you hope that he can stay healthy. And if all of those things come true, then I think the Titans will have a pretty valuable depth piece in Jamal Adams. I think where I shunned the idea that he wasn't washed before, I think he's not washed. I think he still has some good ball ahead of him. So I'm looking forward to that. But that was a banner day on Titans Twitter, to be honest with you guys. I mean, we were having a field day with it. There were people panicking. The sky was falling. There were people saying, hold up, it's not that bad. People were saying this makes the Titans a fucking Super Bowl contender. That's crazy. Y'all need to calm down with that. Unless you're trolling like me, in which case I vibe with it. Good job. Keep up the good work. But it did cause Jeffrey Simmons to tweet something along the lines of, I'm just seeing a lot of tweets out there that I bookmark. And then Mike Herndon was blocked by Jeffrey Simmons. Jared Stillman blocked by Jeffrey Simmons, which I think the prevailing theory is that Stillman was blocked before this incident. But Mike and Zach covered his blocking in depth on Football and Other F Words this week, along with the preview of the safety position. So I'd recommend going and getting a chance to listen to that. They got in and out of there in an hour, and it's because I wasn't there to take us down a Sam Howell rabbit hole, how he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the league, and I think he's the future of the Seahawks franchise. I didn't get to derail us that much with my one more thing. So it's a nice, concise show, a preview of the safety position. They talk a little bit about Jamal Adams and Jeffrey Simmons blocking him. A lot of people have called it soft, and there is something in the back of my head that does kind of feel like, oh man, it's just, I mean, if you're that rattled by people on Twitter, what's going on in the locker room? And to Simmons' defense, he does have to play with the pressure. He does have to hear all the criticism. I get one person every few months that's just like, Stoney sucks, can't listen to his podcast, he cusses too much, he makes sexual innuendo too much, despite the fact that football is a pretty raw, sensual, guttural sport. It's like, I'm just saying, like, there's not that much difference between a hard-hitting football game and fucking in a room with no air conditioning. I'll just leave it at that, okay? They don't like my personality, and I can shrug it off. I can say, fuck that person, and go on about my day. Don't have the magnifying glass on me the way a stud NFL player does, where it's just a nonstop barrage. If you're logging into Twitter and you see the negative stuff over and over, and it's a regular occurrence, and you're under this pressure from coaching staffs and people, I get that football players are paid handsomely, but the fact is you're still thrusting young guys in, man, there's another, I didn't mean for that innuendo to happen. You're thrusting young guys into high pressure situations that might not be particularly well adjusted to the world. As a principle, I'm not talking about Jeffrey Simmons specifically in this case. I can understand where if you're under pressure from coaching staff and you only get like 17 days out of the year to prove your merit, that's pressure. And if you're constantly seeing the negative stuff, if you're not used to that, you got to cut it out so that you can focus on ball. So in a sense, in that case, with that understanding of it, I say, yeah, you know what? I get why Jeffrey Simmons would want to block people, to cut the negativity out. Plain and simple. I get it. The issue with Mike, though, I don't fucking get it. Because it's not like Mike went a little hard, okay? But I tweet stuff that goes a little hard sometimes, and it's partly tongue-in-cheek. We're just having fun. We're caught up in the moment. It's part of being a fan. But I think like what Simmons took issue with wasn't really all that bad. And that's where, I can say if he's blocking me, no harm, no foul. Like, do what you got to do, big man. I'm still going to be rooting for you on Sundays. That kind of deal. But I'm also in the back of my head, like, you're blocking me over this? Blocking me over this? I don't know, man. I'm curious to see. I hope somebody asks him about it in a press conference. My hopes aren't high that it gets done. And maybe I should take up some of my friends on their offer to get me in the building. Maybe I could ask myself. They're not going to let me in the building. They're not. Titans PR is going to take one look at my Twitter feed and say, this guy is unserious. they're going to be like, oh, he's trolling. He's not really a member of the PFWA. Paid my dues. They either didn't check my Twitter or they checked it and said it was okay. So I don't know. My point is, I would be curious to hear more of an explanation. And I know Jeffrey Simmons was on Ramon, Kayla, and Will this week, kind of defending it, said he was protecting the locker room. I get it. But just, I don't know, man. I don't know. It makes me feel a certain way. And Zach pointed out on F Words this week that you're just talking about a younger generation of players that maybe, it's different handling this sort of stuff than in years past. But I don't know. What do you guys think? That's what I'm curious. Would you rather a player respond to criticism by blocking you, or would you rather a player respond by quote tweeting a picture of your significant other and saying yikes? It's like we got both ends of the character spectrum going here in the Titans locker room, and I hope it works out for them. Training camp battles that I'm stoked to watch this summer. I think we've got quite a few starting spots. I'm gonna say, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna say 6 because I think the right guard spot is locked up. After doing my film study on Bill Callahan's run scheme in Cleveland, which is up on stackingtheinbox.com, it's a great video. Zach and I really get into the weeds on some of the film there. I feel like Sadiq Charles is the right guard. I think he's got the right combination of power and speed that they like from their guards. I think it's an important position for guys to be able to not only get out in space when they're pulling, moving around a little bit, but to hit like hell when they get to the spot. Blow those fucking gaps open. And I think Sadiq Charles is capable of that more than any other guard in the running for it. I think Daniel Brunskill is going to move over to center, and I think they're going to feel pretty good about Cush, Brunskill at center, but then Brunskill also being a swing guy that can play pretty much anywhere if an injury arrives. I like that. I love Brunskill as a depth piece there. I think he can be a pretty good sixth man. So I'm not including right guard. I am including right tackle because I am fascinated by the summer we have had at the right tackle spot. Nicholas Petit-Frere, probably you'd consider the incumbent, has some experience, played well in the past at right tackle. I think he's more of an athletic guy. Zone blocking. I think Jalen Duncan, man, the hourglass is running out on my boy, it sounds like. I was a big advocate for Jalen Duncan. I still think he has the athleticism to develop into a nice player. I think maybe moving to a more gap-heavy scheme could help him in a way. I think there's less reading and reacting involved in a lot of these plays, running with a gap scheme. And maybe that was the biggest issue with Duncan, making the reads, following the assignments, understanding what's happening in front of him. But I still think he's a really talented guy. And while he may end up being the odd man out, I think he's a prime candidate for a practice squad spot. I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. I'm still not giving up on him. But the guy that has really made this race interesting is John Ojukwu. Because John Ojukwu is the one guy of the three that seem to be in the running for this job that really has an element of power to his game to go with the athleticism. John Ojukwu a big, long guy. John Ojukwu had some great tape at Boise State and was my favorite undrafted signing last year. Didn't know if the staff would have the patience with him along with Jalen Duncan. So I kind of felt like Ojukwu would be the odd man out. But with Duncan and NPF both being injured to start OTAs, Ojukwu was the guy that they plugged in at right tackle. And from the sounds of reports coming out of those OTAs, he's done pretty well. And you hear Brian Callahan talk about him in media availability. Sounds like, yeah, he's done everything we've asked him to do. A little bit higher on him than I think we were before the season started. I've been a big fan of his for a long time. But now comes the part where the rubber meets the road. Training camp starting up. It's going to be a competition. Let's see how he holds up with a guy like NPF there coming back, getting the reps. Jalen Duncan getting healthier. He missed some time this spring with an injury. Getting healthier, making this a race for that spot. I think it's a 3-horse race, and I'm fascinated to see how it's going to play out. On defense, looking at the inside linebacker spot, because I keep joking, and safety too. Safety two. Amani Hooker's going to get one spot. Who's going to be that second one? I still think it's going to be Elijah Molden or a guy that they sign that is yet to be named. Quandre Diggs maybe, though I still think he's closer to Jamal Adams than he is prime Kevin Byard. So I don't know what the answer is there. But I like Elijah Molden. So you factor in these safeties and linebackers, and I think those are two of the positions we'll talk about here. And across linebacker and safety, I kind of feel like this organization is trying to like recreate Kyle Hamilton in the aggregate. Like they've got a player on the roster that can do something that Kyle Hamilton did well for the Baltimore Ravens last year. I don't know that that's the goal. Part of it is like just a funny joke. It's nice little catchphrase. Let's create Kyle Hamilton in the aggregate. But then also when you look at the players' skill sets, it's like, okay, well, they need this situation covered. And for the Baltimore Ravens, Kyle Hamilton could do all of that. We don't have a Kyle Hamilton. So how can we replicate that for this defense? And so I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, ideally, I want Cedric Gray to rise up and claim one of these linebacking spots and be the guy that I think he can be. But we have to read the writing on the wall. It doesn't sound like they're in any hurry to get Gray into that spot. And it's the same with James Williams. I want him to grow into that spot. Joking, like tired Jack Gibbons and Kenneth Murray wired James Williams and Cedric Gray. It's a funny tweet, but I kind of like that's the vision. I want that to be what these guys can grow into. I just think that I might be being a little overeager to make that happen. It sounds like the Titans are going to play it patiently, and instead, Jack Gibbons will be lined up to do this. Kenneth Murray will be lined up to do that. When they need something else, they're going to bring Jamal Adams in. They're going to pull Elijah Molden up. Like, I think it's just going to be a bunch of different moving parts in the middle of the defense. And to quote our buddy Easton Freeze of the Hot Read podcast, you worry about the spine of this defense. And I think the solution is going to be to just fill guys in certain situations. And instead of having one guy that can do it all, they're going to have role players that can do specific things, is what I feel like the approach is going to be. So I don't know who the starters are going to be. There might not be clear-cut starters at inside linebacker. I mean, there might just be personnel groupings where if they're in dime a lot more, maybe Jack Gibbons isn't even seeing the field. Maybe Kenneth Murray is lined up at edge. And maybe Jamal Adams is the dime linebacker. And then there may be other cases where Jamal Adams is off the field and they've got Kenneth Murray, they've got Jack Gibbons, and they've got Cedric Gray out there defending the run. It's fascinating because it's the one position, you know, we talk about right tackle. I think that's a very important job that's up for grabs, but you have three guys in the race. It's a clear competition. For inside linebacker, we can say these are the two best inside linebackers on the team, but there's a myriad of guys with different skill sets. It looks like the multiple personnel groupings they're going to use them much differently. So I'm fascinated by that because not only do I not know who is actually in the inside linebacker race, but I don't even know how the inside linebackers are going to be used in this defense. Get your popcorn, folks. It's going to be a show. And then I look at, what else do I have here? Punt returner and kick returner. Like everybody else covering the Titans this spring, I too am fascinated by how teams approach kick returns with the new special teams rules. I tend to think this is a space where Treylon Burks can still make a clear impact. Would love to see him returning kicks. I acknowledge blocking and running might be more important in tighter quarters for this kick play. So it could be a running back that gets that spot. I still like Dylan Johnson. Julius Chestnut is still in the fold. Sounds like Hassan Haskins has had actually a pretty good OTA session. I've seen a couple of people at practices say Jabari Small is making plays. Interesting decision to be made there at running back, but I ultimately don't think running back 3 is going to have major play on offense. So how do they approach that? Do they put a running back out there, or do they maybe give a shot to Treylon Burks, who is big as fuck, gotten ripped, maybe a bit of renewed vigor in this game with a new coaching staff and the chance for a fresh start? As a wide receiver, I don't think he's gonna be a factor. I think they're gonna look to DeAndre Hopkins, to Calvin Ridley, your big two. I think Tyler Boyd's going to be that security blanket. And I said on the Hot Read podcast last week, I think they're going to be throwing the ball to the tight ends and the running backs more than people think. Opens the door for Treylon Burks to be a sneaky big play machine, drawing up like 3 or 4 plays his way where he's catching the ball 30 yards down the field kind of deal. But I think his biggest impact, I think he could be the kick returner for this team. What his specialty is, his strength and physicality, his shiftiness in the open field with the ball in his hands, navigating traffic. You're not asking him to get out there and run precision routes. You're not asking him to understand complex, route concepts or anything like that. It's just get the ball, run through traffic. And I think he could be a player. I'm not ready to give up on Treylon Burks either. Punt returner, I don't know. I mean, it sounds an awful lot like they want Jaquan Jackson to be the guy, but this idea that Kearis Jackson is still hanging on to the roster has been floating around. I don't think anybody's outright said it yet, but I've heard a couple of people, or seen, I should say. I don't hear tweets. I see tweets. You read them. Let's be logical here, folks. I'm a champion of that. I've seen people suggest that Kearis Jackson could be a surprise addition to the roster. I liked Kearis Jackson, gadget kind of player, untapped potential at Georgia, but I don't know. I'm not ready to put him ahead of Jaquan Jackson just yet. I feel like Jaquan Jackson is going to be the punt returner, and then kick returner, you're looking at, is it going to be Treylon Burks? Is it going to be Dylan Johnson, Julius Chestnut, or Hassan Haskins? There's 4 guys that I could realistically, and maybe even I don't know, maybe you do throw Jaquan Jackson into that mix and Kearis Jackson into that mix as well. It's wide open. Position battles up for grabs. I can't wait to break this down even more once we get more football to dissect starting next week, man. And like I said, we're going to try and get Owen back on the line. It's been a minute since you guys have heard from him. I'm excited to hear how he's feeling about training camp, what he's looking for, all that good stuff. It starts up next week, baby, and then the season will be here before you know it. But that's going to do it for me on this fine Friday morning. Hope you all guys have some fun weekend plans. I've got the house to myself. Wife's out of town on business, so I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to pull up the Coach Dan Casey YouTube channel and just drink beer on the couch. And I want to smoke my pipe in the living room, but I'm afraid she's going to smell it when she gets back. So might have to wait until she's gone for a longer period of time. Maybe I can do it in my office and open up a window, get some air circulation. I don't know. I could use tips from smokers, how to not get caught smoking my pipe in the house. That's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for continuing to listen to the Unofficial Titans podcast, the flagship show of So Bros Network. Remember to go out to Mount Juliet, Check out Memo's Mexican Kitchen, mile north of I-40 off the Mount Juliet exit, the best Mexican food in the Nashville area. Listen, I have the palate of a raccoon. I've told you guys that before. I eat anything. I love anything. I'm not too hard to please. I took Zach out there. Zach's a bit of a foodie. And Zach agrees. Pretty damn good. Pretty damn good Mexican food. So everybody I take out there, as a matter of fact, chimes in. Yeah, this is delicious. Check out the menu at memosmexicankitchen.com. Even got an ad going on Sobros Network. So if you go to sobrosnetwork.com, you can click the banner and go right to the website. Check them out. Let them know that Stoney sent you, and enjoy one of the best meals you'll have in this city. Check out all of my work covering the Titans, film studies, NFL draft coverage, stackingtheinbox.com. All of my other work is up at sobrosnetwork.com. Merch is up at sobroshop.com. Of course, rate, review, and subscribe to the Unofficial Titans podcast. Tell a friend. Hey, if you're one of the people that does like my sense of humor, that does get that I'm kind of a sarcastic, passive-aggressive troll sometimes, but also knows that I'm willing to chop it up in the DMs, and I talk to everybody, and I try to be as down-to-earth and grateful as possible for this platform. If you're one of those people and you know somebody that you think might be into it, let them know about the Unofficial Titans podcast. I'm here because you guys keep tuning in, and I'm grateful for that. So rate, review, subscribe wherever you take in your shows, and that's going to do it. Yeah, I'm Big Natural Stoney Keeley, and until next time, you stay classy, Titans fans.